Some people wake up already tired. Not because they didn't sleep, but because, before their feet hit the floor, their mind is already checking on everyone else. Did I upset someone yesterday? Is everyone okay? What still needs fixing? You feel it when your phone buzzes. A small tightening in the chest. Not fear exactly. Responsibility. You are the one people call when something goes wrong. The one who listens. The one who smooths things over. The one who steps in before things fall apart. And maybe you've been told this is a strength. That you're kind. Reliable. Mature beyond your years. But no one talks about the cost. Because underneath the helpfulness is a quiet rule you live by. If I don't take care of this, everything will collapse. You don't say it out loud. You barely notice it anymore. It just feels like reality. You notice tension before others do. You sense mood shifts. You read between sentences. You adjust yourself to keep the peace. And when something goes wrong, even if it had nothing to do with you, a familiar thought appears. What could I have done differently? This isn't control. It's vigilance. It's not ego. It's survival. People who feel responsible for everyone often don't feel powerful. They feel necessary. There's a difference. Because necessity doesn't feel like choice. It feels like obligation. You stay awake worrying about conversations that already ended. You replay moments. You imagine outcomes. You prepare emotional exits for situations that haven't happened yet. And when you're finally alone, there's no relief. Just the hum of alertness still running. This isn't because you want to manage people. It's because, somewhere along the way, you learned that safety depended on awareness. That harmony had to be maintained. That problems didn't resolve themselves. That someone had to hold it all together. And that someone became you. You don't feel proud of it. You feel tired. But you keep going. Because stopping feels dangerous. Often, this pattern doesn't begin with responsibility. It begins with uncertainty. A home where emotions were unpredictable. A parent who was overwhelmed. A room where tension lived quietly in the corners. No one sat you down and said, "You are responsible now." You just noticed that things went better when you were careful. When you were helpful. When you didn't add to the noise. So you adapted. You learned when to speak. When to stay quiet. When to anticipate needs before they were voiced. Not because you were asked to, but because it worked. Peace followed awareness. Conflict followed relaxation. So your nervous system made a decision long before you did. Stay alert. Stay useful. Stay ahead of the storm. This isn't people-pleasing. It's pattern recognition. It's the child who noticed that adults didn't always have space. The teenager who became the emotional translator. The one who learned that being easy made life easier for everyone. You weren't weak. You were perceptive. But perception turned into duty. Over time, helping stopped feeling like generosity. It started feeling mandatory. If someone is upset, you lean forward. If someone is struggling, you step in. If someone is silent, you assume it's your job to figure out why. And when you don't, guilt arrives quickly. Sharp. Persistent. Because somewhere deep inside, there's a belief. If I let go, something bad will happen. So you hold on. You become the emotional buffer. The steady one. The reliable presence others lean on without realizing how heavy they are. And the strange part is, people often thank you for it. They call you strong. Capable. The rock. But rocks don't get held. And eventually, even the strongest ones crack under constant pressure. The cost doesn't arrive all at once. It leaks in slowly. Resentment you don't feel allowed to have. Exhaustion you don't feel entitled to name. You tell yourself it's fine. You've handled worse. Others have it harder. But your body keeps the score. Tight shoulders. Shallow breathing. A constant sense of urgency, even on calm days. You struggle to rest without guilt. Relaxation feels irresponsible. Joy feels conditional. Because if you're enjoying yourself, Who's watching the edges? You may notice that your needs feel vague, hard to identify, easier to postpone. You know what everyone else needs. But when someone asks what you want, your mind goes quiet. This isn't selflessness. It's self-erasure. Not intentional. Not dramatic. Just gradual. And the hardest part isn't the giving. It's the silence around your own weight. No one sees how often you choose others over yourself. How many times you swallow discomfort to keep things smooth. How often you stay longer than you should. You don't feel angry. You feel depleted. And sometimes, late at night, a question surfaces. Who takes care of me when I stop? It's a frightening thought. So you push it away. You keep going. Because responsibility has become identity. But carrying everyone doesn't make you whole. It makes you disappear. And deep down, you already know that. Eventually, something gives. It might be small. A missed call you don't return. A request you ignore longer than usual. A moment where you realize you don't have anything left to offer. And the world doesn't end. That's the first crack in the pattern. Because for a long time, you believed your vigilance was the only thing holding everything together. That if you stepped back, chaos would rush in. But instead, what rushes in is something else. Fatigue. Sadness. A strange sense of grief you can't quite name. You may feel it when you're alone and no one needs you. An emptiness that feels unsettling rather than peaceful. Because if you are not needed, who are you? This is often when the body intervenes. Exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. Irritability that surprises you. A heaviness that makes even small decisions feel overwhelming. Not because you are weak, but because you have been strong for too long. You may start pulling away without fully understanding why. Canceling plans. Becoming quieter. Needing space you don't know how to explain. And guilt follows closely behind. You worry you're becoming selfish. Cold. Unreliable. But this isn't withdrawal. It's recalibration. It's the nervous system realizing it can't stay on high alert forever. For the first time, you may begin to notice how much you've been holding. How rarely you've been held in return. How often your care flowed outward, never looping back. This realization hurts. Not because others did something wrong, but because you finally see yourself clearly. And clarity changes things. Letting go of responsibility doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what was never yours to hold. This is the hardest shift. Because you've been taught that responsibility equals love. That if you don't anticipate, prevent, and fix, you are failing. But love doesn't require self-sacrifice to the point of disappearance. Care is not control. Presence is not management. You can care deeply and still step back. You can love people and allow them to face their own discomfort. This isn't cruelty. It's respect. At first, this feels terrifying. Your body doesn't trust it. It waits for consequences. But slowly, something surprising happens. The constant tension softens. The background noise quiets. You begin to feel where your edges are. And for the first time, they matter. You may notice how often you say yes automatically. How often you apologize for things that aren't yours. How often you rush to fill silence. And you start to pause. Not to punish anyone. Not to prove anything. Just to breathe. This is not becoming distant. It is becoming present to yourself. And with that presence comes grief. For how long you believed your worth was tied to usefulness. For how early you learned to disappear quietly. But grief makes room. Room for wants. Room for rest. Room for relationships that don't rely on your constant vigilance. You don't need to abandon love to set it down gently. You are allowed to be a person, not a pillar. And that permission changes everything. When responsibility loosens, something unexpected happens. The noise fades. The urgency recedes. And underneath it all, there is a quiet you don't recognize. At first, it feels wrong. Your body doesn't know what to do with stillness. It keeps listening for alarms that never come. It waits for the moment someone needs you again. Because for so long, movement meant safety. Doing meant belonging. Fixing meant purpose. So when there is nothing to fix, you feel unanchored. You may notice it on slow mornings. When no one has asked anything of you yet. When the day hasn't demanded a version of you. Instead of relief, there is discomfort. A restlessness that whispers, I should be doing something. But what it really means is, I don't know who I am when I'm not needed. This is the space most people never talk about. The in-between. The after. You are no longer carrying everyone. But you haven't yet learned how to carry yourself. And that can feel frightening. Because responsibility once organized your world. It gave you structure. It told you where to stand. Without it, you have to listen inward. And that voice is unfamiliar. You might start to notice preferences you ignored for years. That you like quiet more than conversation. That certain people drain you. That some places feel heavy, even when nothing is wrong. These realizations aren't dramatic. They arrive gently. Like truths that waited patiently for you to be available. And availability is new. For the first time, you begin to feel hunger that isn't about fixing. A desire that doesn't come from obligation. A need that belongs to you. This can bring guilt. Because wanting something for yourself once felt dangerous. Selfish. Unnecessary. You learned early that needs complicated things. That they made you harder to love. So you learned to be simple instead. But simplicity cost you depth. And now, depth is returning. You may notice how hard it is to receive. Compliments feel uncomfortable. Offers of help make you uneasy. Your first instinct is to refuse. To say, it's okay, I've got it. Because receiving feels like burdening others. Like reversing the rules you lived by. But learning to receive is not weakness. It's balance. It's allowing relationships to become mutual rather than one-sided. It's letting care move toward you without needing to earn it. At first, this feels like standing still on moving ground. You wobble. You overthink. You pull back. But slowly, your body learns that nothing bad happens when you don't rush in. That silence doesn't mean danger. That other people can hold their own weight. This is where trust begins. Not in others. In yourself. You start to trust that you don't have to monitor every emotional shift. That you can step away and return. That love doesn't vanish when you stop performing it. And something else changes too. You begin to feel sadness for the version of you that never got to rest. The one who was praised for being strong, but never asked if they were okay. The one who learned responsibility before safety. This sadness is not self-pity. It's recognition. It's the moment you see yourself clearly, without judgment. And in that clarity, compassion grows. Not the kind you give automatically to others, but the kind you offer yourself, slowly, cautiously, at first. You stop pushing yourself to be the solution. You stop apologizing for having limits. You stop measuring your worth by how much you can carry. Instead, you begin to notice something quieter. Something steadier. You are still caring. Still thoughtful. Still deeply aware. But now, your care has edges. It knows when to stay. And when to step back. It knows the difference between support and sacrifice. Between love and obligation. This doesn't make you less kind. It makes you more real. And real relationships can breathe. You may lose some roles along the way. Some dynamics shift when you stop over-functioning. Some people don't know who to be when you're no longer holding everything. That can hurt. But it also reveals truth. Because the relationships that remain, the ones that adjust, the ones that meet you where you are now, those are built on presence, not pressure. And presence is sustainable. For the first time, you are not defined by how much you give, but by how fully you exist. And that existence is enough. There is a moment, often unnoticed, when you realize something fundamental has shifted. You're in a familiar situation. Someone is stressed. Something is unresolved. And for the first time, your body doesn't surge forward. You notice the urge, the old reflex, but it doesn't take over. You stay where you are. This isn't indifference. It's discernment. You are still aware, still compassionate, but you are no longer fused to the outcome. And that difference is subtle, but life-changing. Because for so long, responsibility felt like love in motion. If you weren't moving toward the problem, you felt absent. If you weren't fixing, you felt disconnected. Now, connection feels quieter. It lives in listening without absorbing, in caring without collapsing, in being present without disappearing. You begin to understand something that once felt impossible. You can witness pain without becoming its container. This realization doesn't harden you. It softens you. Because when you're no longer bracing for impact, you can actually feel. Not just other people's emotions, but your own. You notice joy without scanning for what might go wrong next. You laugh without immediately checking if it's appropriate. You rest without rehearsing explanations. And rest stops feeling like something you must justify. This is not a dramatic transformation. There is no sudden freedom. No clean break from the past. Old patterns still whisper, especially in moments of stress, especially with people you've known the longest. But now, you recognize the whisper, and recognition changes everything. You don't shame yourself for feeling responsible. You don't force yourself to be different overnight. You just notice. And sometimes, noticing is enough to choose differently. What begins to emerge is a new kind of strength. One that isn't loud. One that doesn't announce itself. It's the strength to pause. The strength to say, "This is not mine." The strength to let others experience their own lives. This is where something larger happens. When you stop carrying everything, you interrupt a pattern that didn't start with you. You begin to see it clearly. How responsibility traveled through generations. How silence was mistaken for peace. How endurance was praised more than ease. You may recognize it in the people before you. Those who survived by staying busy, by staying useful, by staying quiet about their own needs. They didn't choose this consciously. They adapted. And so did you. But adaptation doesn't have to be permanent. When you set down what was never meant to be yours, you are not rejecting your past. You are honoring it differently. You are saying, "This stops here." Not with anger, not with blame, but with awareness. And awareness is how cycles loosen. You may notice that younger people around you respond to this shift. They feel less pressure, less emotional gravity. They learn, without being told, that care does not require self-erasure. This is how healing moves quietly through families. Not through confrontation, but through embodiment. By living differently, you give permission without speaking. And perhaps the most important change happens internally. You stop measuring your worth by how much you can endure. You stop confusing exhaustion with virtue. You stop believing that love must be proven through sacrifice. Instead, love becomes something mutual, something shared, something that moves both ways. You still show up, but you no longer disappear in the process. There is space now for your own complexity, your own contradictions, your own needs. And you don't rush to resolve them. You allow yourself to be unfinished, human, learning. This doesn't make you unreliable. It makes you honest. And honesty creates relationships that can breathe. Some days, you will feel steady. Other days, you will feel the old pull return. Both are part of integration. Because healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming what was paused. Your curiosity, your rest, your right to exist without constant contribution. You are still responsible, but no longer for everyone, only for yourself. And that responsibility feels different. It feels lighter, kinder, more sustainable. It feels like coming home to a self that was always there, waiting patiently beneath the weight. You are allowed to live a life that doesn't revolve around holding everything together. You are allowed to let others carry themselves. You are allowed to be a person, not a role. And that permission, once felt, cannot be taken away.